So I'm sure people will be dipping in and out here, but thanks for joining us for our final office hour session for the systems practice course. We are joined again today by Jeff Moore, who is the CEO of Kumu and a systems mapping expert in general. So I will turn it over to Jeff to give kind of the 2.0 version of how to use Kumu now that people are a bit further along in the course. So thanks again.
Perfect. Thanks, Amy. And can I share my screen now?
Yep, you should be able to.
Perfect. And let me know when this comes through. Can you see that?
Yes.
Okay, wonderful.
Perfect.
Yeah, so what we'll do in today's office hours, if you haven't had a chance to view the recording from the previous one, that first office hours is really focused on the kind of like basics of getting started, creating your course project workspace, adding some of your first elements and connections, and really building out that structure of the map. We dove into some additional things around decorations and coloring and how do you use some of the more advanced features of Kumu, but focus less on that. Think about this office hours as a bit of a flip. We'll still touch really briefly as a refresher to say, hey, here's how you create the course workspace. Here's how you build out the structure of the map, just to make sure you're reminded of how that works. But then we'll spend a bit more time just exploring whatever questions are coming up for folks in terms of struggles, and also some other features which may really help to either tell the story of your map within Kumu, or collaborate with other people, or kind of bring some decorations to life that really help you show things like the leverage analysis that you're either at or you'll be getting to relatively soon. And I know Amy will be watching for questions. I won't see them come through, so she'll be watching those. And Amy, just feel free to interrupt me at any point if any of the questions come through that seem relevant to answer where I am in the process.
Yep.
So one of the things you'll notice when you're on the course, you can come here to this link, kumu.io/courses/systems practice. This is linked out from the actual Plus Acumen systems practice course. And when you land on this page, this is essentially your step to be able to create a free private project in Kumu. Normally, private projects are something you need to pay for. In this case, it's something that we're comping for the duration of the time that you're taking the systems practice course. And so you'll either see a button to create your Kumu login. If you've already done that and you're logged in, you'll see this button to create a course project. And if you've already created a project, you'll see a link to actually take you to that course project, which you already created. So in this case, let me just click this. And essentially what this does is this is creating for you a project in Kumu, which has a bit of the structure to help guide you along. So for example, on this left side, we include some instructions for how to actually bid out your first loop. There is some content already in Kumu, so you're not just landing on a purely blank screen like you normally would if you were starting a new project. You'll see up here, there's a couple drop downs to switch between different maps within this project. So I can click on a completed map, so you can actually see an example of what a fully built out systems map might look like in Kumu. And then if I click this again, I can come down to your personal workspace. And this is really meant to be where you would build out whatever map you're building as part of the course. And again, switching between these is as easy as clicking that first drop down. And we'll stick here on this first example, which is building your first loops. So we had talked briefly about kind of the UI of Kumu. I won't go into that. But what I do want to focus on is kind of like our three primary principles that we try to remind people of for using Kumu systems mapping. And the first is about how you build out the basic structure of your map. And so we call these circles elements. They might be referred to as factors in the systems practice guide. The lines are connections. And then the label that you see here within this loop is what we call that a loop in Kumu. It's essentially just a label for a loop. So you're building out the elements and connections first and adding a label. But that's the basic terminology within Kumu. So when you're adding content, this green plus button is the best place to start. If you ever get lost and don't know how to add something, just remember, okay, green plus button, come down here and I can click it and I can choose to either add an element, a connection, or a loop. So if I add an element, I just type the name of that element. So let's do factor 1 and hit enter, and that's added to the map. and I can drag this wherever I want. The first tip, though, that we want to remind people of is this idea of Alt is your friend. And so what I mean by that is there are some keyboard shortcuts within Kumu which really help speed things along. You can hold the Alt or Option key on your keyboard, and then anywhere you click, you can add another element. And if you hold Alt, you can drag between two different elements and create a connection between them. So it's a much faster way to be able to build out the structure of a map. And we essentially, what we also have is a mode we call sketch mode, which is essentially like if we were holding Alt for you the entire time, that's what sketch mode is. And so again, come down to the green plus button, click sketch. And when you do that, this will change to this pencil icon. And then anywhere you click, you can add another factor. You can just drag, and so you don't have to hold Alt or anything when you're in sketch mode. So you can really quickly create the structure of a map doing this in a way that's pretty simple, pretty lightweight, and pretty fast, and relatively similar to what you'd be doing if you were drawing on paper. And if you ever need to get out of sketch mode because you want to click on a map and not add things, you'll see this exit kind of link in the lower right corner. So that's the basics for just adding elements and connections. One of the first things you'll probably run into is, hey, I added a connection, but I need to add the plus and minus arrows to show the polarity or causality of that connection. The way you do that is by clicking on the connection. When I do that, you'll see this left sidebar changes. Again, if I click on one of the factors, it's changing as well. So everything in Kumu has its own profile. And where you'd actually add the plus and minus is clicking on the connection, and then you'll see in pretty light font underneath the factor 3 to factor 1. So this lists which connection or which factors are part of this connection. You can click add connection type, and then choose from this list of plus plus, plus minus, minus plus. So say this is plus minus. We'll click that and click done. And now you can see if we zoom in, those are now added to the ends of that connection. If we wanted that instead to be minus plus, right, we would just choose that option, and then that'll include the right symbols at each end of the arrow. And there's no shortcuts for how to do that even quicker. Essentially, what you're doing is just clicking on each connection, adding in whatever the polarities are that are relevant. And then once you do that, you're done with whatever loop you had ended up creating. So we've just talked about elements and connections so far, right? And that final step is actually how do you add a loop? The best way to think about loops is as a loop label. So rather than thinking I'm going to click loop and I'm going to specify everything that's in the loop, you're actually building out each of these elements or factors and connections into the overall structure of that loop. And then once you do that, click plus down here and then click add loop. This now tells you to basically click on whatever connections you want included in the loop. So I can click to unselect, click other connections that aren't selected to select. You'll see those turn into thicker kind of dark gray lines. And then when I'm done, I just need to add a loop label, enter, and that'll now show up on the map. That does a couple things, right? That makes it clear where you can actually have a label that shows up on the map. You can actually click on this label as well, and it too has a profile. And so many people will come in here and add a description, which is essentially adding a narrative of what the story of the loop is. And why this is so important is when other people are coming to your map who may not have been involved in the entire process, if you've taken the time to add that narrative here, they may read through the different connections and elements you've created and not fully understand the loop. But if they have a question and they click on this and they can have a really coherent background on kind of, hey, this is what we think of when we talk about this as like a core dynamic in our system, they'll be able to read through that. And it really helps people be able to understand a map quickly, especially when they weren't involved in the building of that. So Amy, just wanted to pause in case any questions have come in so far.
No questions so far.
Okay, great. So think of that. The first kind of principle there is like Alt is your friend or use sketch mode. It's just this idea of there are quicker ways to be able to build out the structure of your systems map within Kumu. And so make sure you're aware of those and you kind of pick which one works best for you. Of course, you can always use the plus symbol and do these directly, but we've found people either holding Alt or switching into sketch mode is ending up being a way faster way for people to build the maps. The next principle is, so once you build out your map, and I'd encourage you to really focus on building out the structure of the map before you worry too much about how you're going to change colors or change size to be able to emphasize different parts of the story that you want to tell. But assuming that you've gone all the way of actually building out the structure of the map, the process for actually doing things like adding colors here is actually by saving information to the side profiles of each of the elements, connections, and loop labels. And so what I mean by that is you'll see we have some of these which are a bit of a teal color, some which are a bit of a blue, and some which are purple. What we're not doing is we're not just coming in and saying, I want to make economic performance purple and I want to make blame government teal. Instead, the way Kumu works is you first save some information to this profile about why you'd want to decorate it teal, right? So in this case, what we're doing is essentially trying to identify which factors on this map are related to government versus related to citizen engagement versus related to the economy. And so the way that this map has chosen to do that is using something called tags. So you'll see if I look at this profile up top, we have the name of this factor. If I needed to change that, I could just click this pencil icon and edit that label. And then if we come down here, we have a description. So if you wanted to, you could say, hey, this is what I mean by blame government. This is our kind of understanding of this factor. You can add whatever text you need here. And then right below that, you'll see this rectangle, which says government. So that's a tag. You can click this edit link here and add whatever other tags you want. It'll show you a list of everything else that's already saved to another element or connection or loop so that you can know to kind of keep using the same nomenclature that you've used before. So say we wanted to add, like this is highly influential for some reason as a tag, you can just type that and hit enter. And then when you click away, those will get saved. But essentially, you're doing some step to save some information here to this left side. Another thing that we've seen people do is create a field. So right now, think of fields again as other kind of easy ways to save information about each of the elements, connections, and loops. This could be if you're mapping people, right? This is more of like, hey, it's a phone number or it's an address. So think of it as kind of descriptors of whatever you're mapping. One thing we've seen is people actually saving a trends field, and they might say, hey, this is increasing over time. So you can add a custom field, give it whatever label you want, and then save that value. And then once it's saved here in this profile, you can actually use that to create a number of different decorations within Kumu. But the most important thing to remember in terms of the mental model is add the information to the profile first, and then we'll move on to showing how you actually do the decorations. So let me switch over and I'll show you the steps for adding a decoration. So we've already done the colors for this map. So the way that we have done that is by clicking the settings button on the right-hand side. This will open up the settings for what we call the view. So think of, we have maps in Kumu and views. The maps we had switched between were the smaller kind of pieces of the map we had built out. In this case, it's a full map. You can create any number of maps that you want within Kumu. The data is shared across them, so don't think of them as like being able to create a separate version of the map, but you can be able to create related maps all in one project bucket. And then the views are what actually control things like coloring. So we have this decorate tab, which is assigning these colors. If for some reason you needed to filter some of the elements that you have in this map out, you could do that. But primarily what you're going to be doing is clicking this decorate tab to be adding and changing colors and widths and things like that. So we have government right now here showing up as teal, but let me walk through, say we were creating the government decoration from the get-go. and we wanted it to be kind of like a deep red, we'd come here and click Add Element Rule, because we're basically saying we want to color the actual circles on the map. Up top, make sure you have Decorate Custom Selection chosen. And then what you're doing here is you're just telling Kumu, hey, based on the information I've saved in the profile, this is what I want you to select for what's going to get a certain color. So we've saved it to tags. We do tags. We'll want to do contains because we're looking just for a specific tag. And then in this case, it's government. So if you start typing, it'll show other things that match in the tags field already. We can click that. This will let you know, hey, we found 15 other elements that have that tag, so it's a good idea that you set this up correctly. And then we can come down here and choose any of these checkboxes to be able to actually add that decoration. So in our case, we want to change the color. We can keep this selected on set a fixed element color. And then here we can choose kind of this red. And if you scroll all the way down to the bottom, we can add a legend entry. So I'll type government and then click done. And now you'll see those all show up as red. And so what's nice about this is so you can quickly, rather than thinking about coloring each one of these individually, we can just change this decoration and then we can change all of those colors. So think of it as kind of a data-driven approach to being able to do the decorations rather than more of kind of like a paint or draw approach to doing that. One thing that also comes up as a really common decoration that you're doing, one of the steps within the systems practice is actually this idea of a deep structure, right? And so you'll have a loop or a handful of loops which are really at the core of your map and that you end up building out other loops around. We found it's really helpful to visually identify, in this case, right, we have this central deep structure which says R15 trust and government, and then we have in parentheses deep structure. That's one way to do it. You'll see we also have these connections saved as a bit thicker lines, and that's done here through this decoration. But I'm gonna delete that so we don't have that anymore, and we'll actually walk through about how to add that. And again, it's the same process as before of first have to have information on the profile for those connections. And then from there, we can actually add a decoration which changes the width of that line. So in this case, what we did, we clicked on each of these connections and then added deep structure. You can do this one by one, or if you hold shift, you can click on each of these lines and then that'll select all of them. And then you can edit here to be able to change the tags. In this case, we already have deep structure added, but if we were, let's remove it just so you can see how this works. So if we remove it, none of those have those tags. And instead, if we hold shift, we can click on each of these connections and then come and add a tag. So in this case, let's say deep structure, hit enter, and that's now saved. So once this is on the profile, now we can create a decoration which changes the thickness of the lines which have that tag. Rather than clicking add element rule, since we're trying to change the width of the connection, we'd click add connection rule. In this case, again, we can click decorate custom selection. You'll see if we are already selecting something in the map, it's going to find out and say, hey, I found out like a deep structure tag on this connection. Do you want to use that to decorate by? You can click this here, and that's the exact same thing as coming back and doing tags contains deep structure. So in our case, we probably want to change the size. So we'll change the width of this to be significantly wider so that it stands out in the map. Sometimes people will also add color to it as well, just to make sure it's even clearer. And then we can type in a legend entry again and hit done. And then now that'll show up in a very significant way. If you've added that and you're like, whoa, that was a little too thick and that's a little too bright, you can come back at any time and edit any of these decorations by clicking this pencil icon. And then just change the color that you want to use and change the size by dragging this and then click done. And you can get to something that ends up working kind of exactly how you want it. Same thing with the color. If we think, hey, that yellow color is just really hideous, we need to change it, you can come in here and change that and then click done, and that'll automatically update. And you'll notice in the lower left corner too, there the legend is updating as we make these changes.
I do have one question, Jeff.
Okay.
What do you recommend if you have an element that has two tags that you want to color? For example, an element that has both social and economic dimensions.
So great question. This has been a struggle historically within Kumu, which was it was really hard. You basically had to either pick one color that would win out, or use a color for one and then use kind of a shadow, which is another type of decoration for us at Kumu. We've just released a new feature called flags. And essentially what they allow you to do is add kind of multiple colors around a given factor. So let me just walk through how that's done. I'll make one caveat, which is some of the decorations that you use within Kumu require you to switch into what's called our advanced editor. The advanced editor is basically the same what's listed here, except reflected more in a code view. It's a little intimidating initially, but you'll actually find there's simple things that you can change without having to know kind of the whole structure here to bring some more advanced features of Kumu to life. And so what I'll show you here is just how to add this. Again, if you're struggling, you want to add this and you just don't know, kind of like looking at this page completely scares you off, send us a note. We're happy to be able to add it for you. But the basic thing is to be able to add what we call an element flag. So we just type element dash flag and then type leverage analysis. And so leverage analysis is just whatever name of the field it is that you're using that you want to be able to color by. And then if we say with a given color palette, you'll now see, okay, we have a couple things marked with leverage here in this map, and they're getting this blue arc. I'm going to switch right now into a different project so that you can actually see one that's fully built out with some additional. The leverage I'm going to show you isn't accurate, but I added a couple of these in this map just to make sure you can see how this works. So if we do the same thing here, you'll now see what we have are multiple colors showing up around this. And so this is a great way where if you have a couple different things like that you're trying to show and you just want to have it done automatically, by adding this little bit of code where it's element dash flag, the name of the field, and then with, and then this last thing is just a color palette. Right now, just do neon 2 and send us a note. We have a listing of all of these color palettes in our docs website if you are interested in diving deeper. But again, we can help set this up. And if you click here in the color reference, you'll see any of these qualitative scales. You can put any of these in. So if we like dark 2 better, we can switch back over here and change this to dark 2. And then that'll use a different color palette for us within this map. But yeah, that's the best way when you have kind of, especially tags can be good this way. If you're doing a leverage analysis, if you have a couple different dimensions and you want to really make the map kind of sing where it's like, oh, wow, we have one or two things which touch 3 to 5 different dimensions, this can be a great way to see all of that at once. Any other questions or follow-up questions on that, Amy?
Let's see. She just says pretty cool.
Okay, perfect. So one of the other questions that we'll get, so if you think about this is the basic steps you do in terms of building the structure of Kumu, or building the structure of your map in Kumu, adding some basic decorations, whether that's kind of categories for certain regions of your maps or changing kind of the thickness of the core storylines. You might even get into more advanced decorations like this if you have multiple value fields you want to bring to life. At this point, there's a couple different paths that people end up naturally going down. One is, hey, I need to be able to collaborate with folks. So the way to be able to invite someone to your project is using the 3 bars in this upper left corner. That takes you to the project settings menu. You can come down and click members and then type the name of either the username if they've already signed up or their email address and add contributor. If they already have an account with that email address, we'll just add them right away. If they don't, we'll send them an invitation to create a free Kumu account. And then once they join, they'll have access to this project. And anyone you add here has edit access, so just be aware of that when you're adding folks. One other thing that you may want to be able to do within Kumu is what we call presentations. So once you've built out your structure of your map, sometimes people are interested in unfolding it or being able to do like a guided walkthrough of a map. So presentations are here in this menu as well. We can click New Presentation. And what this does is it basically gives you a UI, which is a bit of a blend of kind of Keynote or PowerPoint if you've used it, and more of kind of Prezi type tools, in that you're able to zoom in and out. This first page is always the title, right? So maybe we say this is public policy in Hawaii. And then we use this plus button in the upper left corner to be able to add a given, think of it as a slide to the map. Again, remember, people will be able to zoom in and out on your map, and so it's not that you need to worry about them not being able to do that or not being able to click on things. But the way people usually use presentations is a way to give people a guided walkthrough of the story that you want someone coming to the map the first time to get. So rather than just dropping them into this big, crazy map, maybe you want to start telling them about your kind of core trust in government loop first. So what we can do, any slide, I can either zoom in. So if I zoom into this point, Kumu will remember that level of zoom. And then if I click plus, we could then maybe pan off to the side. And then I can click plus again. And then maybe we pan down here. So one simple way is just as a way to be able to do kind of like a guided panning through the map. And you'll see as I click back through, it gives you a preview of how you do the panning. The other thing that's also helpful is sometimes panning works, but sometimes it's just too overwhelming of a map if you can see everything. And then in that case, what we can do is activate something called focus. So focus just lets you zoom in on a particular subset of the structure of your map. So if I click on Trust in Government, I can open this sidebar and you'll see what looks kind of like a scope icon. If I click that and then click Selected, what that does, and then again, if you've ever struggled with the sidebar, you can toggle this open and close using these 3 vertical dots. You can always hit Tab on your keyboard too, and that opens and closes that sidebar. It's a great shortcut to know about if you don't want the sidebar open as you're building the map, but you need to be pulling it back and forth as you're adding things to the profile. So we've activated focus, right? And now it's just this trust in government loop. And so this is nice because people aren't being distracted by the rest of the map. You can still click plus and add other content into here. If we wanted to, we could come down and then click here on trust in government and kind of clear the focus, right? So rather than having everything focused, maybe we want trust in government, and we can hold shift, and we also want to select forced timeframes. And then now if we do focus selected, what you're essentially going to get are those 2 loops. So you can do a bit of a kind of an unfolding in this way. And if we were to go back to this slide, right, it'd be zoomed in on just this particular part of the content. We can add in another structure here of the forced timeframes loop. And then the last thing that people end up trying to be able to do with presentations is rather than unfolding by loops, you can think of also unfolding by connections. So maybe you're trying to tell the story, which is, hey, this all starts with pension and health organizations for some reason. What we can do is we can come in here and say, let's focus selected just on pension organizations. We'll add a new slide. In this case, what we're going to do, we're going to clear this focus, and then we want to include this connection. And we're just focusing on this connection, right? So this is the next kind of unfolding step that we're doing. And then we can add another slide. And so for most of the time, you're probably not going to need to do this kind of like painfully slow of an unfolding. But if it's important to you, that is something that you can do. And we can kind of do these 2 connections, same thing, focus again, selected. And anytime you do this focus for a slide, Kumu is going to remember that. So let me save these changes, and I'll just show you briefly what this looks like when you've actually published a presentation, because this is a great way too that if you want to share your map with others, you can just send them this link. They don't need to have access to Kumu already. They can just access this, and based on them having the right URL, they'll be taken into the presentation. Let me refresh it. And so we can click Start Presentation. In this case, it's going to start us zoomed in like we wanted. We could zoom out. We could click around and see these profiles if we were interested in it. And then if we click plus over here, sorry, I'm zoomed out in my UI. It's not normally that small. If we come back here, so we start here. If we click this next arrow, it'll take us through that unfolding that we had wanted. This is activating the focus. We can go in and actually have it step us out connection by connection. So it's a great way to unfold a more complex map without overwhelming people. One other question we'll get to is, hey, I just want to be able to share kind of where I'm at so far with a given map with someone else without them creating a Kumu account. Rather than doing a presentation, another quick way to do that is using this More menu in the lower right corner. Click More and then do Share or Embed this map. If you click this button, it'll create a new link here that you can send to someone else. And if they click that, again, they'll be taken to this map. Don't need a Kumu account. They can only view it. They can't edit it. Don't worry if you see settings here. People can play around with things in here, but they won't be able to actually save them back to your map. And so this is a great quick way just to send your map to someone else, or to potentially kind of like, it can be one of the ways that you submit stuff to others or to the course. We're also doing the screenshots are really helpful because then it makes it so people can quickly compare without having to look in each map link. And to do the screenshot, you do something similar. Come down to More, click Capture Screenshot, and then that'll grab the screenshot for you. Once this comes up, just right click and do Save Image, and then you can download that to your computer and then be able to upload that or email that wherever you'd want. Any additional questions so far, Amy?
There was only one about access to Kumu. Someone was getting a message saying the project had been locked, and so she was wondering if there's a way to gain access again.
Yeah, so just send us an email at support@kumu.io. So if you've had a project that's been locked, probably what it means is you either created the project outside of that course template, like walkthrough process. So that is, we go here. If you didn't create it through this courses link, courses/systems practice, it's not going to give you that comp project. So make sure you did this. If you're still running into that challenge, it may mean that you'd created another project or something has gone awry. So just send us an email at support@kumu.io, and then we'll be able to kind of troubleshoot and figure out what's going on.
Great, thanks. And Lena, let us know if that doesn't work. And I put the support address in the chat box, so you should see it there.
Wonderful. So one last thing I wanted to show, and then we can pause again for any other questions, and then end a bit early, is there's something we have called custom controls, and we've actually built those into the template that you have for the course. So if you switch to the example completed map, and then on the default view, you switch to the leverage analysis, what you'll see is up top, we have a couple links that show up here. So when you get to the leverage analysis, one of the things that you'll be doing is coming in here, and you'll see this leverage analysis field. You can actually click and then save any one or multiple of these checkboxes in terms of whether something's frozen, there's energy for change, it's a mixed bag, there's bright spots, or there's ripple effects. You had seen earlier, right, we had set up decorations to be able to have those kind of arcs around the circle show up based on which ones were saved here. So that's one option. Another option is we can add these labels up top so that if you click on any of these, it's actually just going to highlight anything that has just that value. So if you click on it and nothing changes, it means there's no values. We clicked on frozen, you'll see it's just identifying 2 elements here in this map. We could click on mixed bag, and that'll just show which things are selected. So it's a quick way to be able to have simple clickable toggles to highlight parts of the map. It's not that it's filtering, because you'll still see in the background, we can see the kind of like muted structure of the map in the background. This is just doing something that we call showcasing. So being able to highlight which elements and connections and even loops have certain values for a given field. And if you're looking at how to set that up, we have it set up already here. Again, it's something that's a bit more complex. If you're trying to change this and use a control that's other than the leverage analysis, send us a note and we're happy to hop in and help you. The basic process, if you wanted to change this to maybe say tags instead, we can just change the name of that field, and then any tags which have been added will show up here. And so it's relatively simple, but again, if this view scares you off, know that that same support@kumu.io link that Amy had sent is where you can email us with more advanced questions like this.
Great. We did have one more question come in. Could Jeff show the element flag code again? I'm trying to replicate it now, but I think I missed something and can't seem to find any guidance online.
For sure. Yeah, give me 1 second. So if you click this settings button here, you'll see there's this @settings block up top. And what you're doing is you're adding this line. So it's element dash flag, and then colon, space, and then in quotes, whatever the name of the field is that you're using to be able to assign the colors. And right now it's limited to just one field. So it's just that whatever field you're using needs to have whatever values that you want to drive the colors in that single field as separate values. And then space, width, space, and then in this example, dark 2 is one of the color palettes, but it can be any of the other color palettes that you're using. One other question we'll get occasionally too, in terms of adding kind of ways to add additional features and functionality to your Kumu map. Sometimes people will have done enough research or have other materials in terms of kind of either like slideshows or like presentations, or maybe they have audio clips or they have video clips. Those are all things that you can actually drop in and embed within Kumu, and it really helps to bring things to life. And so say you have, for example, there's something around this urgency for solutions factor, which just like you have a video which just really brings home the challenge which is going on right with this given factor, or within the kind of connection between two factors, or even within this overall like forced timeframes loop. The way that you do that, again, we walk through this in the docs. We call them widgets, and they make it so that you can drop in things like a Vimeo video or a YouTube video. So if you want to do that, just come to docs.kumu.io and then click widgets, and you can scroll down here and find out how to do it. Essentially, it's just doing kind of 2 brackets, and then including an ID from a YouTube or a Vimeo video. And then when we do that, that'll actually bring in and include the video here in this left side profile. So it's just a neat way to have a bit more interactive content in something that ends up potentially being a pretty dry map. Adding the narrative, adding videos, adding colors can really help bring kind of the overall story that you're trying to tell to life.
Great. I don't see any other questions at this point, but this would be probably the final call. If people want to add them to the chat box on the right, or just chime in on your microphone, please feel free to do that now.
So while people are doing that, I'll show one last thing, which people sometimes like as you're adding lots of content at once. We do have this table function in the lower right corner. If you click this, this will switch you to more of a spreadsheet view of your map. So in this case, it starts out showing you each of the different factors, all the tags that are listed here. This could be a great way to go quickly and add descriptions to each of the different elements that you have. If you want to, you can change which fields are visible also. So we can show the leverage analysis field in this table, and you can also switch to looking at the connections as well. and be able to save kind of plus, minus, 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 that type of stuff in here. So if you prefer to work kind of more in the spreadsheet, but still stay within Kumu, that's located here in this lower right corner. Any other questions come through?
The last one is just, can you remind us until when the free Kumu account is open? Will we get a reminder before it shuts down?
Yeah, so think about it, it's about a month after the course. So we try to give you enough time to do things. We can help in a number of different ways. So you can do an export of the data from your project into an Excel spreadsheet. You can grab like high resolution screenshots. We can also help to create a PDF. The PDFs are $9 per PDF, but that gives you kind of a vector quality printout of your map. If you want to continue using Kumu, it's something that after that month, it'll either it'll basically just get locked, or you can choose to continue paying and then have that unlocked. So that's a choice that you have. You never have to worry about it kind of turning from a private project into a public project, right? That's not something we'd ever do. But think about it as about 4 weeks after the end of the course.
Great, and thanks again for making the free use of Kumu available to course participants. Let's see here. Just said thanks. So I think Chicha's good. Don't see any other questions coming in. Any other final things people should keep in mind, Jeff? I think this has been pretty thorough.
No, so I think I reiterate the kind of point we had made in the first office hours and at the beginning of this one, which is just try to focus on first building out the structure of the map, and then think about using alt or kind of the sketch mode to be able to do that. And then remember, our mental model is kind of data-driven decorations, so saving things to the profile first and then adding those decorations. And then that last step of kind of how do you do high quality storytelling, and a lot of times people will switch to using presentations for that. That's really the essence of kind of how to use Kumu well for creating and sharing systems maps.
Excellent, thanks. We did have one more question about where you find pricing information, but I just dropped the link to the pricing page on Kumu. Is that still the right thing to do?
It is, yeah. So basically the way to think about it, we have two different types of projects. We call them private or personal projects and organization projects. Personal projects are roughly $9 per project per month, but they go up in kind of plan tiers. But if you're just continuing with one private project, it would be $9 per month for that. And then organization plans are a little bit different. They have some more features, the ability to kind of add people with view-only edit access or view-only access instead of edit access, and more advanced features like team management and shared admin capabilities. And so it's just the kind of engine behind it gets a little bit more robust. The features that you see within this UI are the same across personal and organization accounts, though. The other option that people have also is free. Public projects are always free on Kumu. So if you're willing to make your project visible to anyone, you still get to choose who can edit it. But if you're fine with anyone else viewing it, that's something that's always free of charge for everyone on the platform. And if you need to change your project to public or vice versa, that's here in this upper left corner in this admin section. You can come and click change privacy, and then that'll let you convert from public to private or private to public.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Jeff, and thanks to everyone for joining us. Good luck with the rest of the course. I think this is our last office hours session, so you're almost done. Thanks again, Jeff, for joining us.
Perfect. Thank you, everyone. Good luck.